Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old-timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. The herb we will discuss today, it's one of my favorites for many reasons. It's one I use medicinally quite a bit. It's one I enjoy eating as well. And it is one of those so-called weeds, one of those common plants that were brought here by our ancestors to be used as food and medicine, that I guess kind of either got forgotten, its usefulness, I know that's true for most folks, or it just kind of got out of hand. It's the, let's see if I can remember the Latin name, Arcticum. I think that's right. Just double check that real quick. Yes, Arctium, Lappa, Lappa. Do you know what Arcticum, there it is, there we are. Arctium lapta is? It's burdock. Common burdock. Burdock, a weed most people try to get it out of the yard. They think of it as worse than dandelions because it has such a long root. Both burdock and cocklebur, which we'll talk about in another show, have seed pods that have all these little prickles on them. They're almost like Velcro. You know, the not the fuzzy side of Velcro, but the hard, plasticky hooked side of Velcro. In fact, that was the inspiration for Velcro, was the burr. As a kid growing up on the farm, I must have spent, I don't even know how many hours picking burrs out of the dog's fur, the horse's manes and tails, etc. You had to cut them out if you didn't get them right away, and even then, very often you had to cut them out, and out of my own hair and off my own clothes. And they will cling to anything. There's so many sayings we have in our culture, like somebody's got a burr in their britches or a burr under the saddle. I mean, they have been considered to be somewhat of a nuisance for a very long time. But burdock is a very powerful medicine. It's specifically good for the liver. We're going to get into all its medicinal values. It does a lot more than that, actually. Has nice, big, edible leaves that make fantastic greens, cooked greens. In Asia, burdock is one of their, in many Asian countries, I shouldn't just say in Asia. I know specifically of the Japanese tradition. When I was younger, I was just a huge fan of Japanese food and food culture. I was studying traditional Chinese medicine, and of course, I love Chinese food. I specifically love Hunan, and I think it's a Guangdong region. Very hot, spicy, very good. Huge fan of Chinese food. Chinese food is very complex. It uses a lot of ingredients. Japanese food is rarely as complex. They like to really focus on an ingredient. Seasonal cooking, really elevating that ingredient or a combination of, fairly simple, elegant dish. And I really like that. I mean, yeah, everybody knows sushi. Sushi's great, okay? But no, I'm talking really, I love the soups and the pickles and the greens and the grilled foods, like just like simple grilled, skewered. items. Really good stuff. They grow burdock as what they call gobo, and they grow it specifically for its root. Well, this is the time of year where we're going to begin harvesting our burdock roots. And that root is going to be long, and it's going to be hard to dig up. The way they do it in Japan and some other Asian countries, that at least I've seen online or on television, um, they grow them in raised beds. So this is really the easiest way. If you're going to grow burdock medicinally or for food, and you really should do both because, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. They build a raised bed with boards on the side, right? Like you would see just a common raised bed here in America. But they have the boards, you could take them out on one side. So the burdock long roots grow down. When they're ready, they pull a board away, they scoop out the dirt, and the roots come out easy as can be. I have never grown burdock intentionally. I have tons of it growing all around me here in the mountains, and I go out with my hori hori knife, and that's the perfect tool, actually. Hori hori knife is a long combination of a knife and a spade that was probably developed by the Japanese for the very purpose of digging such roots. It's a fantastic tool. You can get one for 20 bucks or so. They will last. A good one will last several lifetimes. Your grandkids will be using one. It comes in a sheath. You strap it on your belt. Whenever I go out foraging, I have my hori hori knife. Some people like to use a digging stick. I know Thomas Elpel uses in the old like Native American tradition of a stick to dig with. Yeah, I don't have all day to dig one root. And if you want to get the whole root of burdock, you might as well be playing with that stick for about 2.5 days. I mean, this is a hard one to dig, especially in rocky soil, which is, where I live, it's rocks and clay. That's my soil. We have tons of humus. I mean, this is a rainforest that I live in, a temperate rainforest. You can stick your hand down through 6 inches to 18 inches of humus in the woods. Nothing but broken down leaves. Phenomenally rich soil, full of earthworms. I think, it's actually illegal to fish with earthworms where I live. I mean, one, I guess trout would rather take a worm than anything else. So the state decided they would ban the use of fishing with worms, which is stupid. Okay. Again, North Carolina is a stupid state in terms of our government and our regulations. One of the most stupid states in the entire country. In many ways, we have worse laws than, say, New York or California. But anyway, you can just plunge your hand down in there, and that's great. It's for shallow roots. But then you're just going to hit solid clay and stone. In fact, I cannot remember the word. I think it was a Catawba tribe. I don't think it was a Cherokee tribe. I think it was a Catawba tribe that occupied the area where I now live before, say, I don't know, 1750, 1790 probably. It was mostly Indian territory. Very interestingly, just down the mountain from me, in a town called Morganton. If you're very into politics, you may remember a certain senator from North Carolina that rose to fame during the Nixon impeachment trials. Senator Sam Ervin, he came from Morganton. He was a good friend of my grandfather's, colorful character. Morganton was best known then, I think, for its mental hospital and School for the Blind, I think, was there. A lot of mountain inbreeding, a lot of Appalachian inbreeding. Resulted in a lot of need for certain specific medical care that kind of centered in that area. And there was industry, nice big river goes through there. But very, very interestingly, going way back to I think the 1400s, the Spanish had a colony there. Wow, imagine this. North Carolina going back to 200 years before the first Englishman ever set foot in Jamestown, or the Lost Colony, actually, was also in North Carolina. The Spanish had a fort there in Morganton, and they had a road built between there, essentially, to connect with the main, I think they call it the Royal Road or something that came out of Mexico City. So, this was kind of weird to think about, but long before even my ancestors got here, at least the non-Native American ones. Um, there was a Spanish fort sitting in the foothills of North Carolina and was doing trade specifically for furs. You know, fur was the big reason most of America was actually settled and founded was fur trapping. They were doing trade with the Indian tribes, mostly Catawban, I would assume some Cherokee, and taking it down to the ports of like, well, they would have had colonies actually in like Georgetown, Charleston, St. Augustine, Florida, Savannah, Georgia was a big Spanish fort, and of course New Orleans. And then from there, a major road built all the way to Mexico City. So, I mean, that's not the history I was taught in school. You know, were you taught in school that the Spanish had an actual presence in the foothills of North Carolina long before Sir Walter Raleigh ever set foot on the coast? I was not. I find that very, very interesting. But anyway, and I now no longer remember why I was telling you that in the first place. So we'll get back to burdock in a moment. But let's go ahead and talk about the recipe for the day. Now, I just mentioned how Japanese food is very ingredient focused, seasonal, and simple. The flavors are what we would call elegant if you're a chef. It means not overcomplicated. Just perfect as it is, essentially. In design, like if you're an architect or any kind of designer, a simple design that is functional and just right is an elegant design. So when we talk about elegant flavors, we're talking about very simple. So I'm going to call something an elegant dish that you would probably think would be like the farthest thing from that, right? It's because, I mean, it's simple and it's good and it's just perfect. You know, sometimes I'm accused of getting a little too fancy with my cooking. Let me tell you, it's like three ingredients. And I mean, it is literally one of the best things you'll ever have. And this time of year is perfect. Just perfect. Now, I think it's almost like I rediscover this dish. I was raised on it. Um, but I kind of rediscover it maybe every year or so, watching an old rerun of the Andy Griffith Show. The Darlin family is in town. You remember the Darlin family? They were actually the Dillards, great bluegrass band. And they are invited to eat at, Andy's house, and Aunt Bee, of course, is cooking. And she says she's got some white beans and onions. And Mr. Darlin's like, "Oh, I love white beans and onions." Well, let me tell you, honestly, food doesn't get much better. And on a when the evenings are finally getting cool around here, nippy. I mean, we've been getting to the 40s. And a big bowl of white beans and onions. Fantastic. Big steaming bowl. I like to eat on my porch. I really like to sit in my rocking chair. I have a little table beside me, so I'm usually holding a plate or a bowl in my hand, and everything else to the side. And yeah, it really doesn't get any better, honestly. So I'm just going to tell you, this is just like the most super simple recipe, but and cheap. I mean, gosh, you could serve your whole family for maybe 15, 20 cents a plate. This is good stuff. I use when I'm talking white beans, I'm talking dry beans. So there's of course many dry beans at the store that you can choose from. I mean, depending on what kind of store you go to and where you live. Navy beans would be an option. Certainly, I really prefer lima beans. Just dry white lima beans. Um, they have a buttery flavor to them. They are closely related to our southern lima beans, which are called butter beans. But I'm just talking generic dry white butter beans. Get a pound or two. They're not going to cost you more than $1 or two. I mean, they're just great to have. By the way, those beans are viable. You can plant them as seeds. I often plant um, seeds of beans that I just buy from the grocery store, especially if they have some beans and peas and such that I've never seen, or I don't have any seeds that I've saved. I'll buy them, and I put a few under a wet paper towel for a couple of days. If they sprout, I know they're viable seeds, and then I'll save back, a handful. I mean, a half cup maybe, and that's enough to plant several rows of beans, and then I never have to buy them again. So that's a little tip. Yes, you can actually buy your legume seeds from the store, not obviously roasted peanuts or something, but dry beans and peas. Now, not split peas. I'm talking whole in integral, I guess, beans and lentils. Just a bag of lentils. So you'll buy like a pound for $1. That will actually give you enough lentil seeds to probably plant an acre. You'll never have to buy lentils again. I mean, if more people knew that, and of course lentils can be sprouted and eaten. Many beans can. Mung beans are really traditional in Asian cooking. But let's just talk plain old white lima beans. All right, they're dry beans. That means they need to be rehydrated before cooking. I do an overnight soak. That means I put a pound of beans in the pot with about a gallon of water, and I sit on the back of the stove and walk away. For some reason, my mother will never do an overnight soak. Don't ask me why. To me, the easiest thing is literally just pour the beans in the pot, put some water in, walk away. Well, she likes to do everything fast. I like to cook slow. She likes to cook fast. That's sort of been that was our conflict when I was growing up and getting into cooking. So I'm talking more like teenage years, even though I was actually notorious for being like 6, 7 years old and sneaking into the kitchen and grabbing a frying pan and fixing scrambled eggs for myself. I mean, dangerous, yes, I know, but that was always the way I was as a kid. In fact, we had a kerosene heater, a kerosene stove, one of those standalone stoves, and I'm talking like, 6, 7 years old. My favorite thing to do was to slip out of bed when she was asleep or anybody else in the house was asleep, other relatives and such, and go put a pot of water on there and get it boiling and uh, maybe cut up some carrots and onions. I mean, seriously, I was a little kid. I was cooking on top of a kerosene stove, which is also rather dangerous because I was also putting frying pans on there with oil and I was cooking eggs. And so by the time she woke up in the morning, like on a Saturday, I'd had fixed a full breakfast. She, so she couldn't be too mad at me, right? Because I had fixed breakfast. You see, that was the way. That was how I got to have my, mischievous enjoyment. And it's a big, you know, uh, it's a big feeling, I guess, of independence for a kid to be able to cook for themselves. And so that was my thing. That was sort of how I asserted my self as an independent, mature person at the age of 7 or 8 years old, and nearly burned the house down. I'm sure on many occasions. I'd be in there frying hot dogs. I mean, just I learned to make toast over the a fire and everything. But anyway, I like to overnight soak my beans. So the next morning I come in, I'm going to drain that water off. It's the same thing if you do a quick soak. You just put them in there, you boil them for about an hour, then you drain that water off. Um, then add more water and cook your beans. It doesn't get more simple than that. So to that water, of course, we're going to add salt. Now, there is actually some controversy about adding salt to beans. I know this is weird. We don't think a thing about it in America, but like the French, for instance, do not salt their beans when they're cooking. They say it toughens the skin. A bean with a tougher skin can cause more gas, flatulence. Well, I have not found that to be the case. Perhaps with like a kidney bean, it may slightly toughen the skin. I don't know, but I'd rather have flavor in the bean than not. I don't want to add salt at the end. I want my salt inside the bean. When it comes to butter beans, they really kind of break, or I should say lima beans in this case, even though they are the same family of beans, they sort of soften and break down as they cook. So I don't worry about it at all. So salt to taste. Um, I will usually put some onion in there to cook with the beans. And for me, it's going to be some pork fat. Now, it can be some bacon drippings, or it can be fatback. That's what I'm going to use. It can be lard and salt. It's going to do the same thing. Fatback is already salted. Bacon drippings are salty. That's just one of those things you just got to think about when you're putting together. How much salt am I using if I'm using a fat that has salt in it? Yes, you can just use olive oil and salt. It's not as good. It's not as rich, but it's good. Okay. So cook your beans with onion or without, with salt or without, with whatever fat you like. And then when they're ready, but really, I would say let's say 30 minutes before they're ready. Before they really start getting mushy, before they really start breaking down, they're like al dente, as you would say with pasta. Add in about a fourth cup of cornmeal. That's the secret. White beans and onions with cornmeal because the cornmeal will absorb the excess water and will form a nice, thick, rich broth. Now, when the cornmeal's cooked, when everything's ready, scoop them out, put them in a bowl, top with fresh chopped onions and hot sauce. I always grab my Texas Pete hot sauce. That's a North Carolina thing. You can use Tabasco. You could use Sriracha if you want. It doesn't matter. But I think a nice kind of vinegary cayenne hot sauce, perfect. Now, I might add a pinch of Creole seasoning to my beans as they cook. Of course, I am wont to do that. And I might toss in an herb or two. Uh, you can actually do beans and greens together, but let's just go as simple as possible. And I'm telling you, it's good stuff. You eat that some good white beans and onions with cornmeal in the broth, some hot sauce, good pork fat in there. I do like my pork fat, and some cornbread. That's all I need. I mean, that can be a very satisfying, essentially meatless meal that where I'm not going to miss the meat at all. And I'm a big meat eater. I mean, it's just plain good. If you don't believe me, if you think, well, that's just too simple, it's going to be bland, it's not bland at all. Those beans are buttery. The broth is rich. You put your vinegary hot sauce on there, and those nice crunchy raw onions, and you got some cooked onions in the broth, so you get that both kind of rich and brighter flavors of onion. Oh, it's fantastic. You could absolutely chop up some green onion, like some scallions on top. If you want to make a nice presentation, you could probably serve this. I've actually seen it served in some pretty nice like white tablecloth restaurants. They just do like a big wide bowl, so you got some room around the rim, and they'll do a design across the top with the hot sauce. It floats right on top, so you can get real pretty with it. Chop some green onions and put it on there, and you could probably charge $20 a plate. And I'm not kidding, but you can make that at home. If you haven't grown the beans and dried them yourself, it's essentially a free dish if you have. If you have to buy it from a store, again, no more than say 20-25 cents tops per plate. You could feed an entire family on it, and it's just one of the most satisfying, and yes, I'll actually call it an elegant dish because by definition, the simplicity accomplishing that perfect outcome of what it was intended is what we would call elegant in design or in cooking. Really good. Now let's get into burdock. I always associate dandelion with burdock. They're essentially interchangeable as a liver herb, and the two work better together than either does apart. They're cooling and supportive liver herbs. You can make a nice bitters formula out of them. I often do. That's how I would use my burdock root medicinally. Like I said, most times I would really prefer to eat it. It's a good root vegetable. Mild in flavor, good flavor though. A little bitter, but not unpleasant whatsoever. If think of turnips, it's going to be more like a turnip root in flavor, but not with the sharpness, not with that radishy pepperiness. Or maybe a parsnip. If you like parsnips, you can kind of think of it in that kind of flavor profile, I guess. Certainly not as sweet as a carrot and not intensely bitter at all. It's very good, mild, and the greens are also very, very mild. You know, I have mentioned this several times, but in case you're listening to this for like the first time, my favorite creekside dish, my favorite dish when I'm camping out, is if I catch a couple of trout. Um, I will salt and pepper them, stuff them with some sorrel that has a lemony taste, some wild onions or ramps. I can get really fancy with it, actually. I mean, if I catch some crawfish, I might include some crawfish tails. I might season it with some angelica, which is, but anyway, just something lemony, some salt and pepper, and that could just be lemon. I usually do take a lemon with me, and wrap it in a burdock leaf and cook it directly on the coals of the fire. The burdock outside the burdock leaf, just like if you've seen people wrap things in banana leaves. It's the same principle. The outside leaves will burn and char. The inside leaves are still good to eat as a good cooked vegetable, and the fish is perfectly steamed and cooked within that little package. It's one of the most primitive ways of cooking. It's still one of the best ways of cooking. If you've never tried that, um, go for it. I mean, wrap something in a burdock leaf or go get some banana leaves, any kind of edible big enough leaf. Uh, Pork is, classic in the islands. Chicken would work fine. Fix a pot of rice and just really dig in. And I mean, that's really, it doesn't get much better, seriously. So the roots, like I said, usually combine with dandelion. Great for the liver, great for the skin, and they combine well with licorice root. Now, you may remember me telling you that licorice should not be combined with gentian. The two actually cancel each other out. However, licorice combines just fine, and that's true with Oregon grape. Don't combine licorice with Oregon grape in a bitters formula. Those strongly, potently bitter herbs are canceled out essentially by the licorice. Their medicinal value and their taste, but licorice goes great with burdock and dandelion, more cooling, mildly bitter herbs. That actually makes a fantastic bitters formula for people whose systems are just really run down and exhausted. I mean, the liver's been overtaxed, licorice is kidney supportive. Uh, it's a really good actually a very good bitters formula for this time of year specifically, because first day of fall was just a few days ago. If you're a sensitive person, meaning if you have especially weak kidneys, with the barometric pressure changes, you feel sick, right? If you go up in elevation, whether going up a mountain or getting in an airplane, if you feel it, your equilibrium's off. If you stand up out of a chair, you get dizzy, right? That is a sign that your kidneys are weak. The kidneys balance and regulate the amount of water in the system. And these changes in barometric pressure, or elevation, or whatever, can throw that off, and it will make you feel dizzy and it'll make you faint, even syncope they call it, when you stand up. Or it can just make you feel cold, chilled, achy in your joints when the weather changes. That's a sign of kidney deficiency. And it's especially acute, generally speaking, this time of year. It can also be somewhat seasonally depressive. Very much those symptoms can be related to kidney and liver deficiency. That's more of a Chinese medicine mindset. It's not something we really think about a lot in Western herbalism, but I spent about 10 years learning traditional Chinese medicine. One of the very best remedies for that is a bitters formula made of dandelion root, burdock root, and licorice root. And you throw anything else in there with that. I like to add mint. I like the flavor. It has a cooling property, and I think it works really well. Um, I suppose angelica could be used. Angelica flavor is very much like licorice. Very pleasant. Skullcap, actually. I put skullcap in that formula before and just took it before sleeping. And the skullcap was actually in there just as a mild sedative. I don't think it had any, what would I call it, formula type effect combined with the other herbs. But that was just an experiment. If you're experiencing anything like seasonal depression, you usually want to kind of stay away from the sedatives. So, but just those three herbs, those three roots combined are good enough on their own, without a doubt. Dandelion, burdock, and licorice. Well, let's look specifically at licorice. Dioscorides wrote of two varieties of burdock, and you'll still see this. Greater burdock, the big one, and lesser burdock, the little one. He called them Arctium minus and Arctium bardana. That was the smaller one and the bigger one. He said of the small one, it has leaves similar to verbascum. Verbascum is mullein, maybe. He said they're similar to verbascum, but rougher and rounder. Eh, I don't see it that way. A lot of the small burdock does grow around my house, but you know, maybe his variety of mullein was a little different than mine. Who knows? But anyway, he said the tender root is sweet and white. It is very good edible, and the soft stalk like cumin. I actually don't know that I've tried the stalk. I guess I'll have to give that a try. If it tastes like cumin, that's another great use for the same plant. The root and seed of this soaked in wine have the strength held in the mouth to soothe toothache. That's a use that was actually once very common for burdock and very little used today. Uh, the leaf, essentially, he doesn't specify, but when they say a poultice made from burdock, we're generally talking the leaf. Big leaves, even in the small variety, makes great poultices. Really good first aid, just like you would have your plantain and stuff. Look for your burdock. It's a poultice for burns and chilblains, and the root infused in wine, good for sciatica and dysuria, which I don't remember what that is. I'm going to look it up real quick. Don't worry, I'll cut this part out where I'm looking it up. Dysuria is, painful or uncomfortable urination, an irritated bladder symptom. So, very good to know. The greater burdock action has, oh, no, the leaves have an action similar to those of colocynthus, which I'm going to have to look up as well. Well, no wonder I wasn't familiar with it. Mostly used in homeopathic medicine, native to Asia and the Mediterranean. It produces a watermelon-like fruit. Huh. Mainly used for treating colic in homeopathic medicine. Oh, it's bitter melon. Oh, okay, it's just bitter melon in Asian medicine. Okay, yes, I know bitter melon quite a bit, actually. I did not know that was the name of it. The modern name is Citrullus colocynthus, native of Turkey. Bitter melon, much used in Asian cooking and quite a bit used in traditional Chinese medicine. Yeah, probably I'm sure Ayurveda as well. Um, yeah, it's a good for liver, good for a lot of things, and yes, it would be used very similarly to burdock. Um, let's see. He said the root is large, white within, but black on the outside. True. You want to really trim it up when you eat it and cook it first. 1 teaspoon of a decoction taken as a drink with pine kernels helps spitters of blood and corrupt matter, and smeared on it soothes sores from wrenching the joints around. Um, hmm. I guess we're talking about sprained ankles and wrists and such. Interesting. The leaves, again, as a poultice, effectively applied to old ulcers. Those are sores that are ulcerated and won't heal. And he gives a lot of names for it in different cultures. Gerard wrote of both under the title of Burr or Burdock. And, well, he gives too many names for it as well. And apparently it was quite popular in the pharmacies at the time because he gives a lot of names that it was marketed under as almost like patent medicine. He called the large one clot burr and the small one lesser burr, which he mentions that Galen said had the power to digest and was hot and dry. I'm not sure about that. I don't see it as hot and dry, but we'll see. He says the roots being taken with kernels of pineapples. He does not mean pineapple the fruit. That did not exist. He actually, he means pine nuts. When he says kernels of pine apples, he's talking pine cones, and he means pine nuts, essentially. Pine nuts are expensive, sometimes hard to get. You can usually substitute almonds for anything that calls for pine nuts. Not salted, roasted almonds. I mean raw, often blanched and peeled almonds. As Dioscorides says, they are good for those who split blood and corrupt matter, as we just said. All right, Apuleius says that the same being stamped with a little salt and applied to the biting of a mad dog cureth the same, and so speedily setteth free the sick man. There are a million ancient herbal remedies for rabies. I don't put stock in any of them. If you get bit by a rabid animal, go to the hospital immediately. Don't overreact. Most animals are not rabid. If an animal is rabid, you will see signs. Rabies is only transmitted when the animal is showing symptoms. As best I know, I'm not a doctor, but from all the research and reading I've done, the animal has to be actively showing symptoms for the virus to be contagious. Foaming at the mouth, staggering, acting strangely, eyes that don't focus, etc. I see it far too many times, and I've mentioned this before. Kid will be playing with a stray kitten, gets scratched, somebody freaks out, usually an overprotective mother, calls 911, animal control comes out and kills the cat, okay, and then they do a brain dissectomy and not dissectomy, you know what I mean, they look at the brain and call back and says animal tested negative for rabies, and everybody's so relieved. The mother saved the day. Well, no, actually the mother overreacted and killed a helpless, innocent animal. I have no problem killing animals for food in a humane way. In an inhumane way would make me very angry. I do not think hysteria and stupidity is ever a justification for killing an animal. Stupid people, that's the problem with stupid people. They never recognize their stupidity. Anyway, I digress. But if you actually get bitten, and it's transmitted through saliva, so don't even worry about scratches. No, I'm just saying I wouldn't worry. I'm not saying I'm certainly not a medical professional, but I would not worry about scratches. If an actual rabid animal, like a raccoon, bites you, then seek professional medical care. If you can't seek professional medical care, then maybe it's good to know some of these old remedies, because if they didn't work to some extent, they wouldn't have been passed down for hundreds of years. And there are many of them listed in my books, such as this one. And then, of course, there are just tons of them in any old herbal book, and I mean up until about 1900. Again, I mentioned skullcap. Skullcap was a go-to for rabies. They called it mad dog skullcap. Well, the skullcap root, especially the Chinese version or Russian version, I think it originated in China, has antiviral properties. Who knows if that helped? But the skullcap was antispasmodic, so it would have helped with the muscle cramping. Not a cure, as far as I know. Now, the Chinese version may be, but it was called mad dog skullcap. That's how commonly herbs were used in treatment of rabies. Something I cannot and would not recommend, but I will recommend common sense. Common sense is avoid animals that appear to have rabies. That's what I do, and I haven't encountered one yet. If an animal is acting weird, and it's a predatory animal, such as a raccoon, a fox, a dog, a cat. Bats carry rabies a lot. I've been around bats all my life. I've never been bitten by one. When I say all my life, I mean they flutter and flap all over my head, eating bugs whenever I walk outside at night. We have a lot of bats where I live. We have a lot of caves. I've gotten lost in caves before. I've literally walked through narrow passages with like 10,000 bats brushing against my face as they're hanging there, and I'm just kind of walking by as an unwelcome visitor. Bats don't bother me. They don't freak me out. I actually like them quite a bit. I considered having one as a pet one time. I didn't. But I think it would be very hard to be bitten by a rabid bat. Maybe there are other bats that live in areas where I don't live that eat something other than bugs that are more likely to bite a human. I just don't see why people freak out. So, that's me. Like I said, I practice common sense. It does not seem to be common condition these days. Gerard goes on. He's also quoting this Apuleius, not an ancient herbalist I'm actually familiar with, so I'm not pronouncing that right. I'm sure. He teacheth that the juice of the leaves given to drink with honey procureth the urine, and taketh away the pains of the bladder, and that the same, drunk with old wine, doth wonderfully help against the bitings of serpents. Hmm. Again, I'm not going to endorse that. I'm not going to say that burdock can help against the bitings of serpents, but you have to remember these are remedies that people used for a few thousand years, and who knows. He also mentions that Cumella, another ancient herbalist, declareth, this is, remember, Elizabethan English, that the herb well beaten with salt and laid upon scarifying, which is made by the lancet or razor, draw out the poison of the viper. What does that mean? That means if you were bitten by a poisonous snake, they would make this poultice essentially of burdock and salt, and then they would take essentially a scalpel and put little incisions, little slices across the area that was swelling, and use this poultice to draw out the poison of the viper. That sounds insane, doesn't it? Sounds like crazy superstition. Actually, such poultices have been used. I know of two people, one of them being Marjorie Wildcraft, who treated a copperhead bite with herbs, and an herbalist in the western part of the country, I cannot remember his name, who did the same with a rattlesnake bite using a poultice made of prickly pear cactus. How it works, I don't know. They say these poultices draw out the venom. I'm not sure how that's physically possible. I'm sure most doctors would say it's impossible because the venom gets into the bloodstream. Perhaps some of it does stay localized in the tissue enough to make a difference, and a so-called drawing poultice does pull it out. I don't know. But I have heard firsthand accounts of people using herbs in this matter against the bitings of serpents, as Gerard would say, and they actually had better results than those who went to the hospital. Am I telling you to do that? No, I'm not telling you to do that. I am telling you if you get bitten by a snake, you probably ought to call 911. Yeah, if it's poisonous. Uh, that said, Marjorie and her whole stories on the Grow Network, she got bitten by a copperhead, used herbs, healed up quickly, and very little tissue damage, no problem. Her husband got bitten by a copperhead, went to the hospital, would not use the herbs, had much worse results. Another fellow I've been in communication with off and on over time is Jack Spirko, does the survival podcast. He got bitten by a copperhead. He went to the hospital, and his treatment was quite delayed because they would not believe he had been bitten by a copperhead. He's like, yeah, I stepped on a copperhead and it bit me. How do you know it was a copperhead? Because I know what a snake looks like that we call a copperhead, right? I mean, he's like a survivalist. He actually knows snakes, right? He describes it. Well, it might be a copperhead. He's waiting around. He's waiting around. I mean, they're just like totally incompetent buffoons, which is generally what I've encountered when I've gone to an emergency room. It's a very good place to be ignored and abused. Not a really good place to get competent medical care, in my experience. Some would probably take issue with that. Maybe you've had better experience, but I don't know. He spent like an hour just convincing him he had been bitten by a poisonous snake before they'd even started to treat his wound. So I don't know. I don't know. Back to burdock. He said that the root being stamped is more available against serpents, and that the root in like manner is good against the king's evil. So this Cumella, who was a physician, I believe, um, cannot remember what era he lived in, but anyway, very well respected in his time. Preferred to use the root as a poultice, ground up, stamped as they called it, beaten essentially, and that it was good against poisonous snake bites, which again, I have to give the caveat of, I'm not giving you any advice on that, but against scrofula, or the king's evil, swollen infected glands in the neck. Usually is what that means. Occasionally it can mean gout, because kings were known to eat rich foods, but usually it does mean infected and swollen glands. The stalk of the clot burr, which I think he said was the large, the greater burdock, as they say. Before the burrs come forth, the rind pulled off, being eaten raw with salt and pepper, boiled in broth of fat meat, is pleasant to be eaten. Being taken in that manner, it increaseth the seed and stirreth up the lust. Well, like I said, I have not eaten the stalk. I'm going to have to try it. So peel it and cook it with salt and fat. And I'm sure it's going to be good because the whole burdock actually tastes pretty good. He said it increaseth the seed, so he thought it increased sperm and was somewhat of an aphrodisiac. Um, Being a single guy, I guess it wouldn't do me a whole lot of good to eat it, except as a food. Let's see. He said it is good nourishment, especially boiled. If the kernel of the pine apple be likewise added, it is better. It's again pine nuts, and is no less available against the ulcer of the lungs and the spitting of blood than the root is. So he's talking the stalk, good food, and he thought it was good for tubercular conditions. The root stamped and strained with a good draught of ale is a most approved medicine for a windy or cold stomach. Yes, burdock's been used as a digestive remedy, and he's talking infused in ale, and ale helps settle the stomach as well. Dioscorides, well, we've already talked about Dioscorides. He says quite a bit about Dioscorides, and he also recommended it combined with Malmsey, and that's another one I'm going to have to look up. I may have somewhat of a encyclopedic knowledge of herbs, but sometimes these old terms confuse me. And this, yes, I did not know this. It was a fortified wine made in Madeira. So it would now be our Madeira wine, a nice fortified wine comparable to Marsala or somewhat similar to sherry. I like to cook with Marsala and Madeira quite a bit. All the old cookbooks, the colonial cookbooks, they use Madeira in just about everything. They didn't have access to well, a lot of wines, but the Madeira was being shipped in from Spain, and it was really sought after for cooking, and it is quite good. If you ever had like chicken marsala, you know the flavor. It just goes so well with mushrooms and cream and all that. He said, though, that Madeira, essentially, or Malmsey as he called it, with the root essentially infused in it, would be good for the running of the reins. The reins are essentially the kidneys and the associated organs, and the whites in women, and strengtheneth the back. If there be added to the yolks of eggs, the powder of acorn, and nutmeg, brewed and mixed together, and drunk first and last. So that's very interesting. Essentially, this is a cocktail made of Madeira wine with burdock root, an egg yolk, so sort of like an eggnog type cocktail, which was, the English loved their eggnogs. They still do to this day. Powdered acorn and nutmeg. So again, it's going to taste very much like eggnog. The acorn also would give it a nice bitterness, and he's saying it strengthens the kidneys essentially, and would help with the whites, which is a vaginal discharge. That would be the astringent property of the acorns, most likely, that would help with that. But taken first thing in the morning and in the evening, and I can see how that would be a very fortifying beverage. Culpeper wrote of burdock. Again, he always starts with his colorful astrological language. Venus challenges this herb for her own, and by its cedar leaf you may draw the womb in which way you please, either upward by applying it to the crown of the head in case it falls out, we're talking prolapse essentially, or downward in fits of the mother, by applying it to the soles of the feet. Or if you would stay it in its place, apply it to the navel, and that likewise is a good way to stay the child in. Okay, I have no idea. Basically, I'm tempted to say it's a load of crap, but I'm just going to say Culpeper did mix a lot of superstition and folk traditions into his otherwise professional herbal medicine, which was based on the translation of the apothecary manuals, the medical texts and pharmaceutical manuals of the time from Latin into English. But he did like to put his own twist in things. Um, you know what? Give it a shot if you want to. Email me and tell me Culpeper was either right or wrong if you get any effect of putting burdock leaves on your head or on your feet or on your abdomen, other than it's just a poultice. I don't know everything, and I especially do not pretend to know all the mysteries of womanhood. There are herbalists that are specifically women who specialize in women's health, and they may say, "Yeah, that's totally valid." I, I, I have my doubts that applying burdock leaves to your head is going to help with a prolapse issue. I sincerely have my doubts, but whatever. Um, yeah. But he does mention that the leaves used as a poultice are moderately drying and good for old ulcers and sores. A drachm, which is just an old measurement, about like a shot glass essentially, of the roots taken with pine kernels, helpeth them that spit foul matter and bloody phlegm. Well, it's a common use. Gerard said the same thing 100 years earlier, and Dioscorides some 2,000 years earlier. The leaves applied to places troubled with the shrinking of the sinews or arteries give much ease. The juice of the leaves and the roots, the juice of the leaves, or rather the roots themselves, given to drink with old wine, doth wonderfully help the biting of serpents. So in this case, he's saying given to drink with wine would be a counter venom. I don't know. And the root beaten with a little salt and laid there on the place, suddenly easeth the pain thereof, and helpseth. That word is actually helpseth. We're just going to go with helps. Those that are bit by a mad dog. Okay. Now again, I'm not endorsing this, but burdock leaf is very much like plantain leaf when used as a poultice. And if you've ever been stung by a bee or a yellow jacket or hornet, bitten by an ant even, and you've chewed up a little bit of plantain leaf and put it on there as a spit poultice, it takes the swelling down, it takes the pain down very quickly. So burdock can be used interchangeably in that way. I would not wish to rely on a burdock poultice for the biting of a mad dog, which is what he's just recommended, and he's about to go a little more into that. But if I had no other remedy, at least it would probably help with the inflammation and pain, just as plantain does. He says, the juice of the leaves taken with honey provoketh the urine, and remedieth the pain of the bladder. The leaves bruised with the white of an egg and applied to any place burnt with fire takes out the fire. That's another very old remedy. See that in very many cultures. Burdock poultices used, he says, with an egg. Some say that and some don't, to take out the pain and inflammation from burns. That used to be a primary treatment for burns. He says, take out the fire and give sudden ease and heal it up afterwards. It does have a soothing, healing quality. The decoction of them fomented on any fretting sore or canker stayeth the corroding quality. Means kind of helps prevent gangrenous rot, essentially. Which must be afterwards anointed with an ointment made of the same liquor, hog's grease, nitra, and vinegar boiled together. We don't use nitra very much in medicine anymore, but it did certainly have its place. And again, if there were no pharmacies and no doctors, that would be something you'd want to have on hand, saltpeter and such as that. Its roots may be preserved with sugar and taken fasting or at other times for the said purposes for consumption. The stone and the lask, lask is another vaginal discharge. The seed is much commended to break the stone and causeth it to be expelled by the urine, and is often used with other seeds and things for that purpose. Yes, burdock seed is very good for kidney and bladder stones. Miss Grieve, though, gives the best description in 1931, and probably a little more reasonable on some topics, to say the least. She describes the plant, the big one growing 3 to 4 feet tall, etc. The burrs, she gives a quote from Shakespeare, who compared somebody to burrs and says, "I can tell you they'll stick where they're thrown." That was, let's see, King Lear. He also said, well, he also mentioned it in King Lear and As You Like It. Apparently Shakespeare wrote reference burrs quite a bit. She goes on and on about the history of burdock. She says, used medicinally, the dried roots from plants in the first year's growth form the official drug. It was an official drug in 1931. But the leaves and fruits, the seeds, what she says commonly, though erroneously called seeds, are also used. Fruits, I guess. This is seed pod, is the way I look at it, but yeah, I guess it's a fruit. The roots are dug in July. That's interesting. We always dig them around here in the fall. No, in England, 1931, she said dig them in July. I'm going to have to compare and see if it's stronger in July as opposed to in the fall. Interesting. But she does say that they were easier to dig at that time. That may have been the reason. And she said they extend 2 to 3 feet long. That is true. Making it necessary to dig by hand, also true. I rarely get a full root out of the ground. She says burdock root has a sweetish, mucilaginous taste. Yeah, I can kind of see that. I wouldn't say mucilaginous. Maybe a bit like mallow, just a bit. All right, burdock leaves, which are used less than the root, are collected in July. I agree with that. The seeds or fruits are collected when ripe, when they are brownish gray and wrinkled, about a 1/4 inch long and a 1/16 inch in diameter. They are shaken out of the head and dried by spreading in paper in the sun. Yes, that's all true. All right, medicinal actions and uses: alterative, diuretic, and diaphoretic. One of the best blood purifiers. In all skin diseases, it is a certain remedy and has effected a cure in many cases of eczema, either taken alone or combined with other remedies such as yellow dock and sarsaparilla. So the skin and the liver are very related. A weakened liver or toxicity often results in a skin issue. People these days kind of tend to steer away from the term blood purifier, but yes, burdock has traditionally been used as essentially a tonic for so-called cleansing the blood or strengthening the overall system. And yeah, I mean, it may have some properties of, reducing certain toxicities and such. So, I mean, I don't know why people are so hesitant to say blood cleanser. It used to be a very commonly used term. It just isn't, how would I put it, scientifically accurate or provable. But I think most people still know what you mean when you say something cleanses the blood. I think it's just part of our folk language in terms of herbs that I don't see really any reason to get away from it. But, a lot of people do. And okay, so I'm just, I'm bowing to popular consent. It has an anti-scorbutic property, which means it has some vitamin C in it. Of the root, means it helps prevent scurvy, essentially, and is helpful for boils, scurvy, rheumatic conditions, and by many is considered superior to sarsaparilla on account of its mucilaginous emulsient nature. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it does have a mucilaginous property. I just don't see it as being so pronounced, and it may just be a different between the plants where I live as opposed to the plants where she lived. Maybe her roots did have more of a mucilaginous property. But again, to me, they're not like comparable to marshmallow or okra. But yeah, they do have some. Anyway, in addition, it has been used externally as a wash for ulcers and scaly skin disorders. An infusion of the leaves is useful to impart strength and tone to the stomach for some forms of long-standing indigestion. Yes, it's a very good stomach tonic, actually. When applied externally as a poultice, the leaves are highly resolvent for tumors and gouty swellings and relieve bruises and inflamed surfaces. Generally, the bruised leaves have been applied by the peasantry in many cultures as cataplasms to the feet as a remedy for hysterical disorders. So there again, we have uh, we have burdock applied to the feet for some kind of female condition. Who knows? Who knows? Honestly, a lot of old folk traditions do put things on the feet. I've told you before, I had a Mexican friend whose old family remedy, going back hundreds of years for colds, was to put onions on the soles of the feet, wrap them up, and go to bed. And the next day, you'd be over your cold. Um, yeah, I mean, she swore by it. So I'm not going to say it doesn't work. I'm just going to say I haven't tried it, especially being a man. I have not had opportunity or reason to try it. Uh, Okay, experiment and tell me what you find out. From the seeds, both a medicinal tincture and fluid extract are prepared of the benefit in chronic skin diseases. Americans use the seeds only, considering them more efficacious and prompt in their action than any other part of the plant. They are relaxant and emulsient, that means softening, with a limited amount of tonic property. Their influence upon the skin is largely due to their being of such an oily nature. They affect both the sebaceous and, how do you pronounce that again? Sudoriferous, I think that's right. Sudoriferous skin is glands, and probably owing to their oily nature, restore that smoothness to the skin, which is a sign of normal, healthy action. Or it could be their effect on the liver, or it could be both. The infusion or decoction of seeds is employed in dropsical conditions, that's retaining fluid, edema essentially, more especially in cases where there is coexisting derangement of the nervous system, and is considered by many to be a specific for all affections of the kidneys, for which it may be with advantage taken several times a day before meals. The Thomsonians used burdock quite a bit, as in America around 1900. Well, yeah, late 1800s to around 1900. The leaves of this plant, wilted by the fire and applied to an external injury, will allay the inflammation and ease pain. They are good pounded and put on bruises or sprains, and they will immediately give relief. The leaves are applied to the feet in cases of fever to keep them moist and promote perspiration. Again, a foot application. Interesting. But yeah, really good poultice for any kind of wound. Bites, stings, bruises, and I like that. Wilted by the fire. That would be a really good way to do it. The root is soothing, demulcent, tonic, alterative. It slowly and steadily influences the skin, soothes the kidneys, relieves the lymphatics, and is of great importance in all skin diseases and in scrofulous conditions. It is very soothing to the mucous membranes throughout, and hence valuable to irritated conditions. Its soothing character is also extended to the serous membrane and is valuable in rheumatism and also in venereal diseases, especially, you don't say which one, especially if combined with more stimulating agents, probably syphilis at that point. The seeds are somewhat more stimulating than the roots and are oleaginous, meaning oily. The seeds should be ground in order to obtain their properties quickly, and hot infusion influences the sebaceous glands and is of superior importance in typhoid fever and scarlet fever. Interesting. Cold preparations influence the kidneys, increasing the flow of urine and relieving irritation of the urinary tract. In skin diseases, the seeds are preferred to the root, although the root will act with the same manner, but is not as active. Thomsonia Materia Medica, which is their manual, says essentially the same thing. But specifically, the root is sudorific, diaphoretic, and apparent without irritations. Is good in leprous, rheumatic, scrofulous, scorbutic, gouty, venereal, and nephritic affectations. Perseverance and close application are necessary in order that the system may feel the effect and benefit of this anti-scorbutic remedy. Again, that has to do with scurvy and such. A decoction may be prepared by boiling the root in water. Seeds diuretic specifically, and they like to have it taken in vinegar. They were not big on alcohol, by the way. They give an anti-scorbutic syrup of the seeds and the root with lovage roots, senna, American senna, which is not true senna, green osier bark pounded and combined with molasses, and a little bit of rum. They do actually include some rum in that, which would probably be fairly pleasant. Let's see. The American Materia Medica, this would be what the pharmacist would use, say that burdock is root and seeds, they say specifically, alterative, diuretic, aperient, and resolvent. It is an excellent remedy, although little used by most physicians. So by 1900 or so, it was dying out of use by physicians. It is simple, mild, and unirritating in its operation upon the system, but is undoubtedly capable of exerting a highly sanative influence upon the nutritive fluids and upon the constitution generally by virtue of its depurative, resolvent, and detergent qualities. Uh, that's a real fancy way of saying it's a blood cleanser. It is not adapted to the relief of acute disease, its action being manifested upon the system only after long continued use. Another reason I recommend it in the diet. It promotes action of the exhalant and secreting vessels of the organs to a slight effect and acts as a mild alterative. Alterative means just kind of gradually brings you back to good health. The alternative is too feeble an agent to be expected to effect the removal of formidable or obstinate diseases unaided by other means. Nevertheless, it is a valuable auxiliary to more energetic remedies. I guess we're going to wrap it up pretty soon. Let's hit Jethro Kloss. Jethro Kloss wrote Back to Eden, very influential in the 20s through 40s. You know the description by now. I don't need to get into that. He said it was the root specifically he used, diuretic, depilatory, alterative, the leaves maturating, probably would mature boils, like bring them to a head. I'm thinking that's what he means. Seeds, alterative, diuretic, and tonic. He says excellent for gout, rheumatism, scrofula, canker sores, sciatica, gonorrhea, and leprosy. So he said gonorrhea, that may have been the venereal disease that the Thomsonians didn't specify. Wring a hot fermentation of the tea and use in swellings. It is good applied as a salve for skin eruptions, burns, wounds, swelling, and hemorrhoids. Excellent to reduce flesh. So yes, very good as a salve, or salve, I guess I should say, S-A-V-L-E. Burdock, which you could make combining burdock. Tincture would probably be best. You can actually do it with a tea, but it is difficult. But combining it with, or an infused oil would be even better. But combining it with beeswax to make a salve, or using the coconut oil. Coconut oil is actually what I usually use. Burdock root can be obtained either as a powder or in capsules. Take one capsule twice a day. We don't need to get into that. And according to the late herbalist Michael Moore, leaves grow a very good poultice. Again, of course. Juice of the leaves good for abrasions, heat rashes, and chafing. The leaf is antimicrobial and soothing. Remember how one of the aforementioned herbalists said it was good for to prevent the rotting of wounds. It's antimicrobial. It helps prevent infection. The plant is biennial. Harvest the root before the plant seeds in the spring of the second year or the fall of the first year. So, that's kind of what we do around here. We harvest in the fall of, I guess, the first year, but before it seeds. So, yeah, it would be the first year. I think I probably said the second year earlier, but it's the first year before it seeds. Root is used to diminish liver excess and nitrogen dominance. It cools the liver and mildly stimulates the bile. It does not suppress the liver. The root causes some people to sweat. Burdock is a sodium leaching diuretic, very important. Contains inulin. Inulin from burdock, dandelion, or chicory is good for aldosterone. Good for hypertension, good for recovering from cancer, and could help prevent cancer due to a unique effect on DNA. Increased liver bile can help with constipation. The seeds can be used but are not as strong. He recommended a fluid extract of the root for use as a simple diuretic and a mild kidney tonic. And he had severe kidney issues, so this is one of his go-tos. He died of those kidney issues. But He said it's a mild kidney tonic and could be used when needed in pregnancy, like during a winter pregnancy, when the skin isn't exposed and puts a load on the kidneys for excretion. A lot of people don't know that. We excrete a lot through our skin and perspiration. Very difficult for women who are pregnant during the winter and they have to wear a lot of clothes, obviously, because it's cold. They don't excrete uh, as efficiently, and that can actually really stress the kidneys due to the baby excreting as well. Also good for blood cleansing and chronic skin issues like eczema and psoriasis. Good for atopic reactions to allergies. Thomas J. Elpel in Botany for a Day says the root contains 45% inulin polysaccharides. That's what gives it that kind of sweet, bittersweet flavor that's really quite tasty. PDR for Herbal Medicine, third edition, says burdock may have antibacterial, anti-neoplastic, antioxidant, antiretroviral, very important, anti-inflammatory, and hepatoprotective properties. That means help protects the liver. But antiretroviral, so you often see burdock combined in, you know, flu and cold remedies, anything having to do with viral infection. Plants for a Future states that burdock is one of the foremost detoxifying herbs in both Chinese and Western herbal medicine, i.e., a blood cleanser. But we're not supposed to say that anymore. The dried root of one-year-old plants is the official herb, so yes, one-year-old plants. I did say it wrong earlier. But the leaves and fruits can also be used. It is used to treat skin conditions caused by an overload of toxins, again, blood cleanser, such as throat and other infections. Very true. Boils, rashes, and other skin problems. The root is thought to be particularly good to help eliminate heavy metals from the body. Remember I said the burdock may have some actual properties to help remove toxins from the body. Here's this actually references some studies that I won't get into right now that along with parsley and cilantro, several herbs can help remove heavy metals from the body. Plant is also onions, alliums, also good for that. You have to eat a lot of them raw. But anyway, just another topic for another day. This plant is also part of the North American formula called Essiac, which is a popular treatment for cancer. Now, you know I never give cancer remedy recommendations. Okay? Cancer is very serious. I don't like it when people say this herbal formula or this herb cures cancer because no one can say that for sure. Cancer is also very individualistic, and different types of cancers present differently. Dr. Sebi, I don't even need to get into that fraud. But anyway, I don't say such and such cures cancer. Essiac, E-S-I-A-C, is supposedly a Native American formula that has helped many people with cancer. I will not give any, I'm not going to say anything about it one way or the other. I spoke with an herbalist friend of mine, Tori. She's been interviewed on the show before. She's great. She's very knowledgeable. She said it is a very good cleansing, detoxifying tea. So let's say that in this instance, the burdock has a detoxifying quality and may or may not help. As they say, its effectiveness, Essiac that is, has never been reliably proven or disproven since controlled studies have not been carried out. The other herbs included in the formula are Rumex, it's dock. Dock's also a very good liver herb. Ulmus rubra, it's elm. Rheum palmatum. Wow, what is that? Rheum palmatum. I think that is sumac. I may be wrong, but that's what's coming to mind. The plant is going back to burdock. The plant is antibacterial, antifungal, and carminative. Helps settle the stomach, in other words. It has soothing mucilaginous properties and is said to be one of the most certain cures for many types of skin diseases. Okay, I am going to have to plant some burdock because my feral or wild burdock is apparently not as mucilaginous as everybody else's. It's some, but not, it's not like okra anyway. It's said to be one of the most certain cures for many types of skin diseases, burns, bruises, etc. It is used in the treatment of herpes. So maybe that was the venereal disease they were talking about. Who knows? Eczema, acne, impetigo, ringworms, boils, bites, etc. The plant can be taken internally as an infusion or used externally as a wash. Use with caution. The roots of 1-year-old plants are harvested midsummer and dried. Again, we always do it in the fall. That's the way I was taught. I'm going to have to try this midsummer thing. Maybe that's why my roots aren't as mucilaginous. That could actually be it. That could actually be the reason everyone else is saying mucilaginous. If they're harvesting them in July and I'm harvesting them in October, November, you know what? I think I just figured it out. All right. Well, I'll tell you next year how it goes. They are alterative, aperient, blood purifier, cholagogue depurative, diuretic, and stomatic. The seed is alterative, antiphlogistic, depurative, diaphoretic, and diuretic. I'm running out of time. I'm sorry, I can't look all those up for you and give a definition. You can do that, though. You got Google or DuckDuckGo, which is what I use. Just go for it. Recent research has shown that the seed extracts lower blood sugar levels. That's important. Any inulin-containing plants are always good for blood sugar, diabetic conditions. Hyperglycemic, somewhat stabilizing for hypoglycemic, but specific. But anyway, I need to move on. The seed harvested in the summer, dried for later use. Crushed, very good poultice for burns. Absolutely good for burns, ulcers, and sores. And even though they said use with caution, I can't find why they said use for caution. The only hazard I can find is obviously that the seed pods may be irritating. Yeah, that's an understatement. That just, the old saying about anybody who's annoyed or upset, I reckon he's got a burr in his britches. Yes, incredibly irritating. One of the most infuriating, irritating plants known to man. I mean, obviously nothing like poison ivy or poison oak, but burrs are a royal pain. So anyway, y'all, that's going to wrap it up for this week. Go fix yourself a good pot of white beans and onions with plenty of hot sauce. Don't forget the cornmeal. That makes all the difference. And I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.